rise, we'll have 1 minute silence to remember those that have passed in our region. Thank you. Any disclosures of interest, councillors? That's good. We also have item 8.1, as we're well aware, councillor, removed from the agenda. We'll deal with that towards the end. No apologies, leave of absence. Confirmation of minutes. We have 2 recommendations there. We'll do one at a time. That the minutes of the Gympie Regional Council ordinary meeting held on the 22nd of February 23 be taken as read and confirmed. Someone to move. Councillor Smerdon, Councillor Baldock second. All those in favour? Against? Carried. And recommendation that the minutes of the Gympie Regional Council special meeting held on the 8th of March 2023 be taken as read and confirmed. So, Councillor Polly to move. Councillor Smerdon second. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. We have no petition before us for this meeting. Section 5, Office of the CEO, the annual report. I'll hand over to Mr. Lewis.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, before I hand over to Laurel or Ms. Starch.
Sorry.
So much more Jerry Bills. Yes, stuck in my brain. Anyway, it's my pleasure to present the annual report for Council for the 2021-22 financial year. I guess the 21-22 financial year was a difficult year on a number of fronts. During that period, we had a change in CEO. We also experienced 3 major floods in the region, one of which was the largest in living memory. We also commenced a journey on rebuilding the organisation with the implementation of a new organisational structure and the replacement of our core financial systems and auxiliary processes. And the delay in the report mainly came about through issues that we had with our auditors in relation to the revaluation of our infrastructure assets. All of those issues have been resolved in the clean bill of health and the QAO. It's my firm belief that through the adversity that the organisation and the community experience, we've become a more resilient, competent and robust organisation. And it's pleasing from my perspective that through that adversity we've come out with it as a more positive organisation. So I'm happy to hand over to Laurel now to add any further comments.
Really, Mr. Mayor, I agree. We've had a big year for the 21-22 financial year. The report is broken into two sections. It's the activities that were completed and also the financial activities. As a community, we've said we've gone through a lot with the floods. The annual report is prepared in accordance with our legislation, but it's also with our planning cycle. So we report back to Council every quarter on the corporate plans. This annual report through this period was when we introduced the new corporate plan for Council. So there was, a bit of working still finalising the last corporate plan and now moving into the new one. All of the activities listed is to the best ability of the record system, and it is presented to Council so that it's open and transparent about what we do. And if I will take the report as being read, and are there any questions?
Questions, councillors? That's a first.
I did send in, through the mayor, I did send in a heap of questions, and a lot of those have been answered, and so I'm rather pleased with that. I'm just going through to see if there is anything else.
Or something jumps out. If there's no questions, councillors, Councillor Milne?
Oh, well, it's just we're going back down to financial sustainability ratios, and we've got a couple of crosses in there, but they are, well, I'm reading is one of them is a big result of, say, flooding, and our small loss for that financial year was those impacts on the full carryout. Because, I mean, councils, it's not just a cut-off date, it's everything's slowly going through. So, I mean, it's $1.48 million, but that's quite explainable as a circumstance.
That's the operating surplus ratio.
Yeah.
And the other one is the sustainability ratio. And both of those have been really impacted by the floods and the point work we're doing in relation to restoration or, I guess, emergent works and immediate restoration or recovery as opposed to long-term asset replacement.
Councillor Deborah?
Thank you. Through the mayor, just a couple of things, and perhaps I should have put this one on the list as well. I just noticed that we go left to right with the years early on, and then it goes right to left after that. And I'm just thinking for consistency, it might be better if we keep going left to right throughout the document. With the years like 2021, 2022, that was, I'll send that in an email, I guess.
Just 3 years, Mayor, the pro forma of the way the financial statements are presented is in accordance with our BQAO guidelines.
Perhaps we should tell them they're wrong. It does get a bit confusing, especially for people like me that aren't used to this sort of thing. Well, it wasn't. I'm getting there. Now, the other thing is, I just want to question, if I could, about the, through the mayor, the staffing employees. The figures that we've got, and this is note 6, is that full-time equivalent or actual people?
Sorry, Councillor, what page?
Well, note 6, I've got it on page 18, but I'm working off the one we were sent previously.
It's in the notes, where the notes are.
This one. Can we bring it down?
6, page 124. Page 124.
Yeah.
And bring on the date.
It's full-time equivalents.
Yeah.
Full-time.
Yeah.
Thank you. And I know that we're still short on staff, I believe. We've got positions that aren't filled, is that?
Yes, that's correct.
Do we know what that figure is through the mayor, what that figure is at the moment?
Those figures that you've got are the figures at 30th of June.
Last
I might
year.
have to take the questions that are
Yeah, no, that's-
notice as at this point in time.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions, councillors? We have a recommendation there before us. Is someone to move? Councillor Stewart, someone to second. Councillor Milne, Councillor Stewart to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There are a lot of good things in this report, and I'm not going to highlight everything. I'm just going to note a few things. There have been lots of achievements. Lots of things have been completed. One was the Northern Point Boardwalk, which I had the pleasure on Monday of almost dying on it because I was running along it, but anyway. Another one, and this also highlights one of the issues we've got, is that Gap Road was in Cedar Pocket was widened. A few months later, 400 mils of rain fell on it within a night and washed some of it away. And that's part of the reason why there's an operational deficit. I think we need to be honest about most of us came in wanting operational services. It didn't work last financial year, and partly it's because of things like Gap Road, where all of a sudden we had to put in a whole lot of operational expenses into fixing up damage. And that's been compensated for by the state government, but that won't come into effect until this financial year. So, anyway. The other thing was just on staffing, what was noted by Councillor Devereux just before. It's got elected members as employees, which isn't quite correct, but anyway. It's got administration staff and depot outdoor staff, and people think administration staff are just like pin pushers in the office. They're a lot more than that. They're people who actually engage with the community, whether it's in the library or art gallery or community services, or people, various other people as well, or people who design our roads. So it's a bit of an artificial boundary between admin and depot outdoor staff there. So, but I'm happy to move the report. The other thing is the breadth of council activities. There's a huge breadth of council activities, and if you list through it, I think it's hundreds. So whether you agree with them or not, it's still amazing how the council's involved in the community and help building a better community. Thanks.
Councillor Milne.
Just like to follow on from what Councillor Stewart has said, there's obviously been some issues on the later half of this financial year that we're reporting on here that has really affected our end of year result. But I'm hoping that we can move through that and this year's a bit better. This annual report does give an overhaul of actually what we do as an organisation through the whole entire year. So I actually like to have this in one document so it's easy for the public to digest. And it really does show that we have a wide breadth of responsibilities as a local government to be able to provide for our communities. It was one of those, we have just chatted about employees, but there's a big shout out to all the employees that have made this possible throughout the year and really improved some of the hardest times this council's had. It is a little disappointing that we have had that operational loss, but when you reflect on a couple of years before that, that was quite large. We did have an operational surplus, and now we've got a loss, and then moving through to this year. So I'm happy to second this report. I think it's had been gone to the ringer. It's very accurate on our standards, and it's setting us a good foundation, a level of this is how we're going to move forward. And with our new operating systems within and recordings, that we can actually get the information out a lot better and be able to produce these better. So I'm really happy to have this. I'm really happy to second this.
2 speakers for the recommendation, any speakers against? Any other speakers for? Councillor Freeman.
Mr Mayor, I think we sell ourselves short in reading your address and the acting CEO's address. We talk about floods and floods and floods, and we talk about COVID. We haven't mentioned the skills shortage tsunami which hit us. You know, an organisation can't operate with 20% of positions vacant, and that's not just council, that's businesses in Gympie, and it's not just in Gympie, it's our neighbours, councils to the north, to the south, to the west. We've all had to try and get things done in the middle of a major tsunami, which was lack of staff, and it has affected, particularly in 21-22, everything we do, certainly in relation to road maintenance, park maintenance, and all through to getting planning applications approved. It's been a nightmare. We can't operate. We can't import people to fill our seats like private businesses can. It's been a major impediment, and I'm particularly proud that we've got through it and things are improving. But I think we must not forget what we've been through, which is 20 or more % vacant seats, and that's on tractors as well as behind desks. It's been a major challenge to overcome, on top of the floods, on top of COVID. I think we're through it, and I'm very happy for that, of course, like everyone else out there is. But we've got some way to go, I believe. We've certainly reduced the amount of unemployment, amount of vacant seats in our council. I think we've got some way to go yet. And these things prevent us from getting things done. So looking good down the track. But I do suggest, if you're rewriting a press release at all, Mr Mayor, that's been a big factor in our perceived slowness in terms of getting things done.
Any other speakers for or against the recommendation? Councillor Stewart McLeod.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just to build on what Councillor Fredman said, material shortages as well. Just getting girders for the new bridge over 6 Mile Creek at Tanda would cause delays in that project. But yes, no more to say. Happy to move.
With that, we'll go to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. Item 6.1, the financial report February 23. And Ms. Hatherall. Mr. Lewis.
Good morning, Mr Mayor and councillors. This is our regular monthly financial report. It's to the end of February. In terms of the financial report, we're tracking along ahead of where we thought we would be. There is some really good signs in terms of the fact that the property market growth is still quite buoyant, and that's coming through as increased revenue. In the previous agenda item, Councillor Fredman alluded to the vacancy rate, and that has still been present in our financial results operationally, and that has led to a variance that's quite significant at the moment. The capital program, there's an attachment there with the capital program showing that our current level of expenditure. Capital projects are difficult to try and budget for and because the majority of them are outside and impacted by weather events, soil conditions, other things like that. And there are also quite a number of large projects where big progress payments could happen in the next month or so to change the actual expenditure to date. Pleasingly, Council's cash balance is around $80 million. The majority of that is invested with QTC, although the staff are now looking at some of the official interest rates that are being released from banks that are suitable under our investment policy. If there's any questions at all?
Questions, councillors? Normal update. If there's no questions, we have a recommendation there. Someone to move? Councillor Polly, someone to second? Councillor Stewart, Councillor Polly to speak.
It's just good to see that it is going ahead as expected, and good to hear that you're actually looking at other interest rate options. Finally, just getting outside of the
Through you, Mr Mayor, we'll take our councillor's suggestions seriously.
So, but yeah, so I'm happy to move the report as we received.
Councillor Stewart.
You know the property market, which has its downside. I just took a phone call this morning from a ratepayer who says their property valuation is up 50%, and obviously worried about future rate increases. So I guess need to ensure that we try and equalise things out, so and try and minimise rate increases, but that's really another issue. So I'm happy to second this report, and it's good to see that things are going along fairly well at the moment.
2 speakers for the recommendation. Any speakers against? No speakers for. Councillor Polly to close.
Happy to proceed.
So we'll go to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. Item 6.2, the procurement panel. The musical chairs. Ms. Hatherall, thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Mr Mayor, I'm going to hand this over to James Harrop, who's our coordinator for the Procure to Pay business section, and is the author of this report.
Good morning, Mr Mayor. Good morning, councillors. Before you is the procurement panel report that comes to every ordinary meeting. There are 2 items on here for approval, recommendation for approval. The first one being the minutes from the procurement panel meeting. Now these meetings, that's the exec at the procurement panel, and these minutes have been approved because they're either within the financial delegation of the members of that panel, therefore don't need to come before council, or they are pre-market approval before we release to market. So that's the first recommendation on there. The second is for the approval to appoint a supplier for the supply and installation of water treatment plant, water reservoir instrumentation. This is to upgrade the instrumentation at 11 locations. There were 6 tender responses, and it was found that only one of the tenderers, Hamilton Instrument and Electrical Pty Limited, was conforming. As you will see, there were a number of post-notification clarifications that were sent out. And the recommendation before you is that Council resolve to award RFT 2022-23-10 to Hamilton Instrument and Electrical Pty for the value of 531,767.88. Any questions?
Questions? Councillor Rowe?
Thank you. Through the Mayor, I think we have to address for the public, because if they, the fact that there were 6 tenders, is that the right word? And only one was conforming, and also we're picking the highest, which there's good reasons for, I'm aware, but I'm not sure that the public will. And also the fact that we managed to talk them up on how much we were going to pay them, from the original 415,000 to the 531. I think it would be good just to say for the live stream what's going on there.
So is the question, can we have an explanation?
Can you please explain
how they were chosen as the preferred tenderer, and also why there was an increase in the amount?
Yeah, sure. I mean, yeah, probably need either to take that on advisement and come back to council on that, or
Mr. Mayor.
bring in the gentleman who authored the recommendation.
Mr. Mayor, I'll just might like any comment in relation to that. So what we find with these sort of tenders is we're talking about very specialist services, and indeed this particular tender involved a number of different elements to the tender, and there was only one tenderer who actually complied with the request for providing the range of services required. So it's a specialty and a particular combination of services. But I might ask the management to actually just give a little bit of time from a technical perspective.
Okay, yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. We did receive, well, the tender package was put out for the installation of the instruments with the provision for tenderers to only price either the whole works or individual scopes. Of the 6, 4 only offered supply and instruments rather than supply and install. The next one only was going to install 2/3 of them, so only one tenderer actually offered the full scope of supply and install all the instruments at all the locations. There were varying tags in the tender when it came in, including not offering the brand we wanted in particular locations. And there is also options for additional instruments, and what we've done through the tender clarifications is get the brand of instruments we wanted for Mary Valley sites and get the instrumentation at other sites with the ability to expand in future as opposed to locking ourselves into non-expansion. So it was getting the scope to give us future flexibility and standardisation of equipment that we requested.
So if it was a one or part of tender process, did we do a comparison between suppliers that may have been able to do, say, A and B and someone else do C, to see whether or not we were getting value for money with the recommendation?
The value of the instruments, from memory, was similar but between them. Not some of them were brands we'd never used before, so we didn't want that for standardisation. We're already splitting this scope into this package and it'll be a separate electrical and SCADA package to integrate them. And the reason for doing that staged procurement, because at the beginning of the year when we embarked on this, we weren't sure whether things were 4-week delivery or 26-week delivery, so we wanted to make sure we had everything supplied and installed before we do the final step. So yes, there was the look between what was common between some of the tenders, but also in terms of council administering the contract, it is a much better process for us to have one contractor doing supply and install.
So I guess the other question I have is why do we have a tender process that is either A, which is supply and install everything, or B, supply the bits and pieces you wish to choose to do? If there's, it doesn't appear from what you said that there was a focus on that. Are we just confusing tenderers? And considering the issues that is had in those circumstances where you have a number of contracts over one sort of area, the challenges faced around monitoring and administering those contracts, is that the best outcome?
I believe we got the best outcome, and that what we really wanted, it was a supply and install contract. But yes, we got instrument suppliers who just offered the supply of instruments, which would then have meant we needed to do another contract to.
So then why I ask, I'm looking from a practical perspective, if we're not going to actually go down the path, or it's not the preferred option to have someone just supply instruments and then us go and do another tender to get someone to install them, why ask in the first place? Because you just get businesses that actually go to the effort of putting a tender process together, and we already know that our preferred option is for supply and install.
Yeah, and that was how the tender was put out, was a supply and install, but instrument suppliers chose to put in the offer of their instruments, which I guess was to see if we wanted an alternative from what we asked for.
Councillor Smurd and then Councillor Duggan.
Did we have a budget amendment for this work?
Yes, we have put in that overall the budget will be increasing. We based the budget on having tendered this job a year ago, and there has been escalations in that time.
So does this make the plans more reliable?
Yes, so the purpose of this work is 3 coastal wastewater plants don't currently have flow meters on the inlets. The calculations for what we process is done by adding and subtracting various ones. This is what we should have. And putting chlorine instruments at all the reservoirs is something we've talked to our regulator about, which is allowing better control, that we know what we're putting out to the community as opposed to out of the plant into the reservoir, which then has a delay of 3 days. So there are things that we've got in place because we've discussed these with our regulators.
So it doesn't improve the Mirror Valley plans when it comes to handling dirty water?
No, it better monitors what we're putting out, but we are doing other work on the Mirror Valley plants, trialling different disinfection systems at the moment on one of them to look at that THM issue.
Through sort of this, if I just try and summarise the situation we're in. So the tender was a supply and install tender. With the tenderers that actually begin, some tenderers only elected to tender for supply only instruments, and some tenderers elected to only supply and partial installation on some of the sites. The best option for the council, best value for money for the community, was to run with a single entity that could supply and also install, and there was only one tender that really offered, gave us that option. So that then led us into the negotiation to then ensure that we had the instrumentation that we actually wanted, so there was consistency across the whole region. So that's the reason for the negotiation with the single tender, and that's the reason, one of the reasons for the escalation in price as well. And the final comment I'll make as well is with supply of equipment at the moment, with the market supply chain issues, we are seeing a dramatic escalation in prices.
Having quoted on many jobs before, I think as a business, if it's very clear that it's the preferred option or council's option is for a supply and install, I think we need to be upfront about that, because there is a lot of work that goes into putting tender documents in, and if our focus is that, and let's make the tender leaning that way, and if people want to put in waste their time and only want to do half of it, then that's a choice they can make. I think when you open it up and you say, supply and install or supply or install, we're either serious about mixing and matching contractors and dealing with it or not. And I think most of the time we're really not serious about it because it does create a lot of other issues in managing those contracts. So I think that's just something we see, something we hear from business as well.
Yeah, totally.
Councillor Deborah.
Thank you. Through the Mayor. Now, you said it was like everything or other. Did we say that? Like, when you said it, is that what we actually said in the tender, that you could do part?
Yes.
We did. Okay. So, in actual fact, they were conforming with the tender. If you look at it from that perspective, they weren't non-conforming. Because that's what we asked for. You
Yes,
could do it all, or you could do part. So that conforms.
The term conforming, non-conforming is not strictly right, but in terms of being able to offer the whole package, that's what we evaluated.
So we went back to the successful tenderer and we negotiated.
Yeah.
Did we go back to the other ones and offer them and say, look, we really want it all to be done, can you have another look?
Well, of the four that only offered instruments, they don't do installation, they're only instrument suppliers, so they wouldn't have been able to.
I thought you said part. One was a part install.
The fifth one was only a
some supplied, some do install, some do a bit of both, and then some do everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think there's a bit of a mix. There's a bit of a mix amongst the contractors that.
So 4 of them were only instrument suppliers. They would not be doing installation. The fifth one specifically tagged out they weren't going to do wastewater. They were only going to do water.
Okay.
So that's why we went the way we did.
I'll just reiterate what the Mayor has said, because when I came into this position, we'd just gone through a tender process where some work was put out to tender saying all or part, and then we totally ignored the part and only took the all, which upset a few local businesses. I would hate to think that we're going to put these people off coming back to us with a tender, because even though we ask for something, we then don't even look at it properly. So that's my big concern.
Yeah, we'll take that on board.
Thank you very much.
The one that is the winning tenderer is a local business.
Yes, I saw that, which is really lovely. Well, I'm not pushing back too much. Thank you very much.
So, for me, technical question. These, the monitoring equipment you're installing, is that all new stuff we never had, or is it a replacement of old product, or a bit of both?
It's pretty much all new, so we don't have those flow meters at the wastewater plants, and the only site that we had chlorine monitoring at our reservoirs is Ferguson, Bellevue and Gilman. This is to add that improvement under our water planning for the other towns.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you.
Councillor Wardle.
The contractor that you're recommending, did they recommend this particular instrument, or was it something that was recommended by council?
They've recommended the ones we're installing. Well, the flow meters are the ones we requested because that's what we had standard across our whole fleet. They offered a brand of instruments for the reservoirs, which is a local Queensland company that we haven't used before. So we're putting that at most of the sites, but just for the Mary Valley, we're using a brand where we've standardised for everything through the water plants in the reservoir.
Standardising, which creates efficiencies. Yeah. You've got the local guy who's familiar with the product, so he knows how to commission it and fault find it, rather than someone who's offering a service to install, wouldn't have much knowledge on whatever you...
Any other questions, councillors? Councillor Miller.
Just a minute. This instrument and flow light, I'm out of my wastewater now, but I'm seeing you had a secondary, which is a SCADA system, which is the one I'm excited about because that's how remote we can actually have more efficiencies and actually know our plants without having a person on board. So is this integral to have that system?
Yes, so as I said, we split it into this and a separate electrical SCADA contract to commission it, and that's particularly because there's probably 2 different skill sets there. When we put those both together, it really limits the tenders we've got at times, so we're doing part of that split to to get the specialists on each area.
Any other questions, councillors? Councillor Cole?
One point, going back to the first part of the recommendation, all these pre-market releases, so when are they coming to us, in a couple of months' time? That's what that's about? Tenders?
Yeah, well, it depends on the value. The value's within the financial delegation.
Oh, okay.
And then they wouldn't come.
We may not see them.
Yeah. But yeah, that usually the tender process is 21 days out to market, and then the post-market evaluation recommendation through the process, if it needs to come to council, obviously it needs to be timely to get into the report to come before you.
Yeah, of course. Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, even if you don't see a report recommending you endorse one of these tender processes, you'll still get the information via the flying unit note as part of it.
Yeah. So if I may clarify, I'm assuming then that these prices would end up in next year's budget, because that's effectively what you're doing it for? Potentially. Potentially.
It depends on the timing of the supply chain, and if we can get them in, maybe it'll happen this year, or it might be next year. If the supply chain creates the problems that we're seeing in some areas with the lead times, for example, precast concrete, I think was out past 40 weeks. If that happens, it might be the budget after, but we're trying to put the effort into plans so that we can have all of the parts, the moving parts line up, and we can actually start delivering those projects as and when they're needed.
Yeah, because I was just interested, like the on-site fuel delivery, the price is changing week by week, doesn't it? So how do you budget? Is this tender for a price or just the delivery fee?
The delivery.
The fee,
the price, obviously.
Yeah, very variable.
Will vary in the market.
Yeah.
Any other questions, councillors? We have two recommendations there before us. We'll do the first one, that council resolve to receive and note the minutes of the procurement panel meeting with numbers 80 and 81. Someone to move? Councillor Colley, Councillor Milne to second. Councillor Colley to speak.
I'm just happy to see the council getting on with the budgeting and getting a step ahead. So we're ready for next year. So happy to recommend recommendation 1.
Councillor Milne.
Having these procurement panel meetings come to council has been a great initiative for this council. It gives us transparency of actually what's going on in the procurement world. I think it's been a great step. So even though it may not come to us, we will still get the information, which is then transparent to the public. So I'm happy to have this segment.
2 speakers for the recommendation, any speakers against? Any other speakers for? Councillor Polly proposed.
Please proceed.
With that, we'll go to vote. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. Recommendation 2, the council resolve to award RFT 20022311 to Hamilton Instruments and Electrical Pty for the value. That's on the board there. Someone to move? Councillor Smooden, Councillor Wardock to second. Councillor Smooden to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We're still, to a great degree, playing catch-up with our water and sewage. And it's good to see that we are still getting there and getting some new instruments which make our departments more effective and more efficient. So, I'm happy.
Councillor Wardock.
I have to second, it's water, it's an essential source of life. And to award it to a local reputable company is fantastic. Honoured to move. Second.
2 speakers for the recommendation, any speakers against? Any other speakers for? Councillor Freedman.
The reasoning behind accepting this tender, a lot of what we've heard are operational issues, Mr. Mayor. We could be learning here for weeks and weeks and still not quite understand the complexity of instrumentation. We have to rely on staff in these circumstances. I've never been sure about why we list non-conforming tenders anyway. The tender was for supply and install. I don't know why we list the others because they're quite irrelevant. And it's put us off track somewhat. So we have got a conforming tender in this current climate. Got to be grateful for that. And I believe that they've demonstrated the competence that we need to have a successful outcome. So I support the recommendation.
Any other speakers for or against? Councillor.
I was just going to mention, based on the number of awards that Hamilton have won at the last few years through the Chamber of Commerce, so I'm glad to see that they're doing something for the local area. It's great.
With that, Councillor Smooden proposed. With that, we'll go to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. Thank you all. We'll move on to section 7, community sustainability, item 7.1, the director's update. I'll hand over to Mr. Burns.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate the opportunity to present our quarterly update this month. This is the second or third one of these that we've done over the last period of time. I'm going to present this on my own today. I do have a couple of the officers here should we require in regards to questions. I will take the report as read. It is quite extensive, but we feel as though the Community Sustainability Director is progressing well. In regards to some of Councillor Devereux's comments, our staffing ratio is pretty good at the moment. We've done quite well in the recruitment space. We're extremely busy in our planning and building certification space. As you'll see from the report, we are extremely active in our community enhancement and library space. Ms. Stark is here because I thought you might have questions about that particular area of the report. She's much better at that than I am. We're doing well in the grant space, spending all our money, and we've started to work a little bit harder in the compliance space, and that's starting to pay dividends with some of our developers, contractors and businesses being a little bit more proactive in their own approach to our business. I'm happy to take questions, as I said. I'll take the report as read, but we're very happy with this particular report and all the councillors are too.
Questions, councillors? Well, I'll go with Councillor Stewart first, then Councillor Devereux.
Under land protection, you've got thatch grass, which is a new weed apparently in that area, but it's not much of a description, so it'd be nice for a description to be sent around about it. But I guess it's about being proactive, and where, as been noted in the past, there's some weeds where it's basically too late. You can get rid of thatch grass before will stop it spreading into our area. That would be good. So make sure everyone's on the lookout for it.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, we have on a number of occasions spoken about land protection and the weeds in this space, and we talked about how GRT wasn't addressed 30 years ago like it should have been. Yes, we are addressing the African thatch grass. It's probably the one area I'm least qualified to talk about today, ironically, but I will ensure that I share with councillors a briefing note on that, and I'll also make sure that we maybe do a little bit of media and put some stuff on our Facebook for the public who are watching, so that they can understand what this particular grass noxious weed is about. But it is something that we're trying to get on top of early, and Councillor Stewart is correct in his appraisal of that.
Councillor Devereux was next, then Frederick.
I'll wait.
Oh, okay.
Councillor Frederick.
Yep.
You addressed the issue of music festivals in a positive note. However, from my experience to date, we haven't had much success in certainly the Mary Valley music festivals, if that's the right word, music. Are you going to be able to make any changes so we can act more decisively? Because I know the legislation prevents us, but is there any ray of hope that we can actually be more effective in controlling these things? Because from the information I've got, providing it's under 1,000 people, in other words, 990, we have got, to date, we haven't had any control, as we have discussed many times, because they seem to be on the rise. What's the future for controlling these out-of-control festivals in quiet rural areas with unsuitable roads for 990 people arriving and going in one weekend?
For you, Mr. Mayor, I can see you smiling at the challenge of answering that one effectively.
Remember, it's only 990 people.
I've got it in writing.
Councillor Fredman is actually referring to the most recent event in Amamo, where we were about to take enforcement action regarding that particular event until they advised us that they only had 990 tickets sold, and so we're under the 1,000 limit. The previous event in that space, I believe, had 24 RBT positives, and the police were out in force for that particular 900 night event. We didn't have any complaints that came into council, but the anecdotal information from councillor and some of the residents is that the Bush Duff Festival style that it was quite annoying with the constant bass stomping. But moving to the question, we are reviewing our local laws. We are anticipating that we will be able to make some amendments in our local laws. It is on the schedule to do this year, to review the local laws in their entirety, and that will be coming back to council. We have a view to reviewing some of those local laws and maybe extending them in similar ways to some of our other neighbouring councils, but that process has not started, so I can't really comment any further on that. There are a couple of areas that have, by the changing nature of the world after COVID, we're seeing some changes in our community and our environment and the tolerances and also the interests of our community. Going back to the events, we feel as though we have got a better handle on them recently. We have been able to prevent a couple of events going ahead that maybe shouldn't have, but there is still a few loopholes in both the Planning Act and the local law, the local legislation regarding the smaller events or events that are applying for a development application. And we are trying to rationalise that, and we anticipate bringing a report to council in the not too distant future about the events scene and how we will attempt to manage or control that better. We're working closely with QAS, Queensland Ambulance, and QPS Police, and in certain instances where the events are taking place on leased state land, we're working with state agencies as well. And we are getting a better handle on it, but what's happened is that in South East Queensland, more and more the councils are taking a much stronger enforcement, particularly in regards to EPA and amplified music. And as a result, they're coming into, and as Councillor Fredman would know because we have discussed this, what is in effect a beautiful Gympie hinterland down particularly in the Mary Valley, and it really is a perfect environment for this type of event where they can come and commune with nature and have the event in green creeks. But that poses its own issues, and again, we're trying to address that, and we're hoping to bring in some control measures that may assist Councillor Fredman with his request.
I would have assumed that given Councillor Fredman's wild and free nature, he was probably an attendee.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I believe Councillor Fredman has attended a number of these events.
With the shotgun.
Councillor Fredman?
I'm not responding to that. But I'd just like to say, not all music events are bad. And as I've discussed with the director, our emphasis should be on all events, whether it be music events or religious events or sporting events in the Mary Valley, that the organisers are considerate of the local people. And if they were considerate, then the Mary Valley is a great place to have events. We've got a chasm, a great gap between what's happening now and what is considerate of the community. So it is work in progress, and I think the director might comment on that. We don't want to stamp them out. We want to have good events.
And the time frame, Mr. Burns, on that report to council and possible changes?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, genuinely we were hoping to do it this financial year, but that's not looking as like it will be possible. We've come across not issues but considerations with the local law review, so it'll probably be the latter half of this year before we have something on the table for councils to look at. Early in the 23-24 financial is the most optimistic I can give you at this point in time.
Councillor Polly and then Councillor
I just wanted the director to give some commentary around the airport, because I just noticed, I remember we had workshops here recently about how it was losing money, it was a goose around our neck, and then there's planning developments that were stalled, and then we had people skydiving into helicopter blades. And now we've got the National Skydiving Championships coming as well. What's going on?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. As you would remember, there was some robust discussion in the room about helicopters and gliders and parachutists. The parachutists have had, I'll start there. The parachutists have had a single trial event that was out at Rainbow. There was a little bit of an issue with the planes flying all day over certain areas, and we've modified that with them. But they were so happy that they managed to have secured a national championship and bringing that to Gympie, which was part of the intent when we originally discussed the Parachute Club joining the aerodrome. They are a club, and they're experienced skydivers. They're not people who just come here for the tourism aspect. That may happen at some stage in the future, but this particular group are a competitive group of skydivers who come here because of the natural environment that we have and the availability of our aerodrome. It's working really well, and they're really excited. They're liaising with us quite closely and working with the Gympie Aero Club and others. And even the shift in the aerodrome user group seems to have occurred where there's much more acceptance of it. Not necessarily, initially it was very reluctant, but now they've started to accept it. I wouldn't say they're enthusiastic, but they're accepted. In terms of the aerodrome itself, it has an acknowledged and budgeted operational deficit, but that is something that we report to Council through our annual budgeting process. That annual budgeting process identifies that there is an amenity value and cost to having that amenity with regards to the aerodrome here. It's an authorised landing area, it's not a regulated aerodrome. We have and are bringing some revisions and concepts for councils to discuss in terms of the fees and charges this year. We've been working closely with the user groups on that, and that's really been a 2-year process. And so we're going to make some suggestions to councils for reconsideration on that. But overall, we've rationalised the mowing contracts, we've tidied up some of the leasing conditions. There are still 1 or 2 little hiccups. But generally, we feel we're on top of the aerodrome better. We have a commercial services coordinator, which council's not had for a number of years, or a slightly restructured. That particular individual spends a lot of time and effort, not unduly, but spends a lot of time and effort trying to make sure the users of that facility are optimal. It is working quite well. It is a challenge for council having an aerodrome of that nature, but it is working quite well. With regards to the developments, yes, they did stall for a number of years. I think you're talking about the Rack House development and the Cumulus Air Park. Both of those did stall, but they are currently very active in the development space, in the development approval space. They've got operational works agreements, infrastructure agreements, and are starting to construct and develop those spaces now. I believe Cumulus is pretty much 100% sold. But yeah, going ahead, I'm reasonably positive in that sense. The flight traffic has dropped. We're not sure whether that was part of COVID or some people will say it's part of the fees and charges modelling, but I think it's just an industry trend, and we're starting to see it pick up again now as we're coming out of what's been a fairly tumultuous 3 years.
Okay. One final question, probably not related, but does the airport got anything to do with the hot air ballooning I see in the Mary Valley on the Saturday morning ride? Is that completely different? No, different?
Not that we're aware of.
No. That's just good to see the balloons up there when you're riding around, so didn't know whether it was related to it or not.
Yeah, no, they don't take off from the aerodrome.
Councillor Deborah.
Thank you. Through the Mayor, I'll start with my questions on the aerodrome, just because we're on that topic. It's got here technical inspections. What are they? We've been doing them 3 times a week. Just
driving out to site, looking at the airstrip to ensure that there's no rocks, deceased animals. It's essentially ensuring that the airstrip is safe to land on.
Okay.
And doing a visual inspection. Are there new planes that are parking on site? Is there anything that we need to be aware of from a safety perspective?
Do we have, through the Mayor? Again?
Sorry, if I could just add to that. Through you, Mr. Mayor, we did have a volunteer who worked out at the aerodrome. Unfortunately, she has had some personal and health issues and has had to retire. And as a result, officers have taken over some of the volunteer roles that she did. It's within the remit, it's within our budgeted model. It's just that we've not had an officer for a couple of years doing that because of our vacancies. Those technical inspections also cover safety inspections of the actual runway. It's quite critical in terms of the runway. The runway can break and crack up because it's like any road. When it gets wet or dealing with the floods, that site is quite a wet site. And as such, if there's any damage to that surface, then we have to be careful about aircraft taking off. So that's part of that function.
Okay. Cumulus, the road up to there is a bit of a goat track. Has that been fixed up?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's their responsibility into the area. It's part of an infrastructure agreement, and they'll be doing that as part of the development approval and operational works.
I mean,
there is a council aspect to it, but we're doing it in conjunction with them.
Okay. Because saying it's part of their development, I mean, we're overseeing, I would imagine, all of that sort of thing. So it would have been part of the agreement, wouldn't it?
Sorry, Councillor. Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's generally a private road delivered by the developer and then handed to us as an asset afterwards. Yeah. At the moment, it's still in their hands.
Okay. Thank you. Moving on to Mary Street. Caught that. Okay. With the artwork that's down Mary Street, it's good to see the big stickers. I'm just interested to know, it says here that we've got 3. Is that right?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I understand that one of the art pieces was taken down by the Land and Royal Portland Lessee as they were progressing with their building repairs. So the agreement that we have with the business owners is that if at any time they'd like to take it down,
they can. Yeah, I think it was up for a week. Is that one of the ones that's listed? There's 3 listed. So do we now have 2 or do we now have 3 and that's a 4?
I might need to take that through you, Mr. Mayor. I might take that one on notice. I did actually have it on my phone and then I can find out for you.
I was wondering through the Mayor, how much we've spent doing that particular project.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm looking at a colleague across the room, but we may need to take that on. No, it's a joint project.
Yeah, we can take that on notice. Yeah.
Okay. Because, I mean, looking at this, we've got 4 departments or areas involved and we put up 3 lots of stickers. It just seems like a bit of an overkill. Now, I believe that the cost, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, the cost of getting it done externally was a lot, so we decided to print them in-house. Would that be correct?
My understanding is, through you, Mr. Mayor, is that we are having them done through our council's sign lab. The vinyl stickers are printed, so we are using art pieces that are already owned by council, so they're council's art collection, and they're being printed to vinyl. My understanding was that was a cost-effective way of getting colour and artwork to the street as quickly as council could whilst juggling other projects.
So there's plans to do more?
Yes, there are 2 more. I understand that we're going up in the next week or so. We'll need to check my phone just to double check on those things.
No, that's wonderful to hear. Moving on to waste. Just reading what's here. We're investigating, I take it, an extra bin for recycling. Is that still what we're looking at? Because we voted to look at that a couple of years ago, I think.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, an extra bin for green waste or recycling?
Yes.
For green waste. Through you, Mr. Mayor, council resolved to do a trial. That got delayed by the floods and the back end of COVID. We are still anticipating doing that. It won't be this financial year, but it will be next financial year. It is still an operational fund requirement for us to look into that, and we will still be doing that as part of a FOGO initiative, Green Organic Initiative. There will be a number of other initiatives that we'll come back and report to council on, specifically in the waste space.
My concern is that, or my thoughts are, we've got a Bonnet Road, we're running out of space, and the idea was to take as much green waste out of the site as we could, or out of the landfill. Can you explain why it takes so long to do the trial? I mean, to me, we're looking at bins, we're looking at a truck run. What's the what's the thoughts there on the amount of time that it takes to do a trial?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it's an interesting question. We still have the waste at Bonnet Road until it was moved to a processing facility, either an anaerobic digester or a windrow composting facility. Part of the longer-term issue is finding someone who's willing to do that at a cost that is not prohibitive to council, and also finding it. There's also the decision-making process about the viability of the uplift. So there's an opportunity cost of waste going into the landfill, but there is a realistic cost. And when we put the FOGO trial to council for a resolution, we talked about it being an opt-in service, which was an additional fee for service paid by the customer. And we need to make sure that those figures are viable. We've also considered, we're part of a regional waste forum that is talking about this with the Department of Environmental Services. And we are looking at whether we need to have an opt-in version and something that's paid for, or whether we can offset that with commercial use. So there's a number of factors. It's not as simple as saying, let's get a truck, let's pick up green waste. If it was that simple, we could do it tomorrow. But there are other things that we are working on to try and ensure that the service we provide and that we give to the community is the most cost affordable, the most viable from a long-term sustainability perspective, in that it can keep running, and also the most viable in a long-term sustainability process, so that it is something where we are adequately and appropriately removing putrescible waste from the stream and turning it into something we can use. Officers have investigated initiatives such as biochar, which is turning that green waste into essentially a fertilizer type product through anaerobic digestion and other methods, and the parallel treatment of that green waste. So there's a number of factors in that. We would have liked to have done it quicker, but as I said, the floods and COVID took away some of our emphasis. In addition, the waste team is quite small. I don't know my question, Mr. Mayor, but my answer's today a little bit long, so I'm sorry about that. But the waste team is
I like the information, so.
Yeah, the waste team is quite small. And we have been focused on getting the Environmental Authority for the Eastern Cell landfill extension at Bonnet Road, and creating an environment where we can actually take the majority of our waste that we still take.
And I guess that last point is the priority has been the Eastern Cell and making sure we have a landfill site to save millions in transportation to other areas. And the other thing that Mr. Boyne has pointed out is it's one thing to get it to Bonnet Road, it's what do you do with that after it's there. So if we could issue a whole lot of bins for green waste and FOGO and the like, that's the front end. The back end is what do you do with it once Cleanaway or JJ Richards, whoever it is, or a council truck actually drops it out at Bonnet Road. And there's probably more work in that end in dealing with the product than there is actually in the front end. Picking it up isn't that much of a challenge. It's how are you going to treat it? What are you going to do with it after it's treated? That will take a considerable period of time. And I know the team have been looking at the option that was used at Norfolk Island, the option that was used at Lockyer Valley, and some other different options for trials. But I think I think they would share our sentiments that we would have liked to have done it last year. But things have gotten away and other higher priorities. Councillor
Through you, and they've been bugging me about moving ahead, but the figures have to stack up.
Yeah.
Thank you. Through the mayor, the fact of the matter is, like you say, we're not reinventing the wheel. There are models for this around. And also, I'm pretty sure, and you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, we did say that the green waste was still going to be used, because when they cover things up and do all the stuff, they can use the green waste out there. And we already have areas for green waste, so wouldn't it just be an extension of what we've already got? How we handle that would just be still doing the same thing. The machinery.
I think if we're going to take it out in a green waste bin and then put it back in the dump, why would you take it out?
On top, as part of the...
Yeah, there is a certain amount. The idea of the bins and the trials was to see what percentage we could actually remove from our large landfill site and process either for compost, biochar, or some other product. Yeah, look, it sounds, as I said before, it sounds easy, but the back end of it, there's the product that they used on Norfolk Island. I know the team have looked at that, and it's sort of not cost effective for what we want to do. I think they're further down the path than probably we think, but their focus has been on making sure that we've actually have a landfill site, and hopefully we'll see where we get to with this one in the future.
But it was still through you, Mr. Mayor, the day cover that you were just talking about, so that the waste is soil or day cover. They've just changed the levy model, and from the 1st of July, we'll actually pay for that day cover going into the tip. So it will actually cost us more to use that sort of material on an ongoing basis as of the 1st of July. Not a huge issue too much at the time for Guppy, but for some of our more northern cousins, it's a lot of money and a lot of issues.
Mr. Mayor, I think you mentioned that we have been doing a lot of work, and it's so, because there's a survey that's still out, completed. You've got to get community buy-in. There's no point having green bins if people put rubbish in anyway or whatever, so you've got to get community buy-in, so they've got the survey out, and the work's been done too, so there's that background work is being done. It's never as simple as what it seems, I think.
The survey's had over 1,200 responses so far.
Pretty good, Smith, still going. It finishes on 31st of March, but we had an enormous number of responses. We were pleasantly surprised, I guess. We never expected as many responses as we have had. The team are actually quite excited. And that's on the back of a recent waste audit where we actually looked at what was going into the bins, which was actually in itself, and some of that's reported here. Some of that was really interesting from our perspective to understand that business.
Any other questions, Councillors? We'll go with Councillor Polly, then back to Councillor.
No, so it wasn't a question, just a comment. I actually read it on Facebook, so it must be true. A city that offered free chickens to whoever wanted. They gave out 3 chickens to everybody who wanted, and their waste went down dramatically within weeks because people just fed the chickens and saved it from the tip. There you go. We could always do that.
Chickens do come with roosters sometimes.
Councillor Devereux.
Thank you. Through the Mayor, just looking at the flying fox issue, I'm starting to get a lot more people contacting me about that at the moment. I've sent in videos. I can't see those numbers being right. You've got here 62,000. I reckon I saw them in the first minute that I was watching. It is black. It's like a cloud. And they're heading off. I realised they weren't just going that way that I could see easily. They were going the other way as well. 5 different directions I counted at one point. Are we, like we did a lot of clearing in Commissioner's Gully of what we could. Have we kept that up, like maintained what we've cleared so that we're not going to have a bigger problem down the track?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'll try and answer this one as quickly as possible. There's a couple of elements to this. We are working and have just won a contract for some additional work at revegetating Ouija Crossing, which is where we believe a number of these flying foxes have come from. We're looking at some other revegetation sites, and after fact, we've just got another small grant, or just applied for another small grant too, to do some of that work. We don't count those flying foxes, Councillor. The Department of Environment does that on our behalf. And at the point in time that they collected those numbers, they believed they were appropriately correct based on the way and methodology they count those flying foxes.
Can we see the methodology? Because I question it.
I think you literally go down there and count the square, but I can find that out for you, take that on notice, Mr. Mayor. In response to those flying foxes, the numbers were probably a quantum of 4 higher than that, so 4 times as many as that a couple of years ago, even 5 maybe. I think they were getting up to nearly 300,000.
Yes.
Well, it's worse.
Yeah, and what we've done is we've put in a sprinkler system that operates at certain times to discourage the flying foxes from actually coming into roost and leave. However, we can't use that system, and we can't do any vegetation work when the flying foxes are pupping, having babies. They are a federally protected species, and so we have to control them on that basis. We can't just go in and scare them off with AC/DC, which is what they did at the Melbourne Botanic Gardens once and got in trouble for.
Are they available?
Sorry?
Are they available, the band?
Yeah, they just played AC/DC for about 3 days in a row, and all the flying foxes left and moved to Geelong, and so they got in trouble. So we're not allowed to do that, and the pupping season this year was a bit peculiar. So it has lasted longer, and it started later, was more intermittent and lasted longer. So we had pups in the trees up until just a few weeks ago. So we've only just restarted the sprinkler systems and the removal of weed species vegetation, which we did a significant amount of last year. So yes, that work is ongoing and continuing. We are still undertaking works to discourage the roosting of flying foxes in that space, and we are also still attempting to share information with our local residents. I don't think anyone will ever be happy as long as there are flying foxes there. They are significantly reduced. They may not be the numbers that you think, Councillor, and I can't really comment on that, other than the kind of numbers that we have, which may be 6 weeks old now.
Thank you. Now, I guess in regards to the pupping, and we can't do anything, I realise that, and I think the residents there are well aware of it as well. It makes it more important that when they're not pupping, that we get in and do what we have to do, I guess. So I'm pleased to hear that we are. The other thing is with the Widgie crossing and with these other roosts, we've taken a long, I mean, that was identified as something we should do before I was even in council. It was being talked about. It took us a long time to get started on it. I don't understand why, but it's good to see that.
That's very simple. There was no money available, and council didn't provide any money available until we got around.
It wasn't suggested that we should.
It was before my time, as you're aware, Councillor.
I understand. Yeah. I'm just letting you know.
That was part of the issue, that it wasn't addressed earlier.
So I'm pleased that they are being. How long do we think until the Widgie crossing, for example, is like that they would use it if they remember it?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, and I'm not being facetious. I'm not a flying fox, and as such, the flying foxes are nomadic. There's 3 different types of flying fox: grey, a red, and a black. The black tend to be resident, and there are not very many of them. The grey, they can move around a little bit, but the red are very migratory. And at certain times of the year, they'll all leave, which is why we saw a significant drop in numbers, and then they'll all come back. At Mundubbera, I think there's over 3 million, and like 2.5 million leave at one point of the year and go up north to Darwin or something, and then come back. They choose to do that. They will also move to wherever the most appropriate food source is, or wherever they can fly to the most appropriate food source. And that is dependent on the types of vegetation. And they will move. They may never go back to Widgie Crossing. We're revegetating it, we're doing that work, we're spending that money. These flying foxes may never go back to Widgie Crossing. They may move from Commissioner's Gully to the riverbank or somewhere else where there is a good food source. They choose to do that themselves. And because they're a federally protected species, we have to be able to manage that when it happens.
I don't know if you'll agree with this or not, but my take on it is the longer that we leave it to get the old roost, up to where they would use it, the less likely they are to go back there. That's my concern.
I think, though, that would be determined by how quick the trees grow. And I'm not sure, like Mr. Burns, as he said, he's not a flying fox. He can plant the trees and they will take a period of time to grow, and the work has already been started, and as soon as the trees are in suitable condition, there will be an opportunity for the flying fox to roost there.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, there are other roost sites though that these flying foxes could have gone to if they've chosen this one for whatever reason they've chosen it, and they'll move when they're ready. We can try and discourage them, which is what the sprinklers do, and what the removal of the food source and vegetation is that we're allowed to remove. So we are doing as much as we can to discourage them being in Commissioner's Gully. But
the overarching frustration, particularly for those that are affected, is that we seem to place the habitat of the flying fox, which can move anywhere, as higher importance than the health and the well-being of the human beings that are exposed to them. And that, for those in the community that sort of operate under common sense, it doesn't make sense. And yes, there are times that it's better to take action, like when there's not pupping. But it seems to be that even in those times, there are so many restrictions placed on us by the federal state government that the residents don't get a say. And I know that's not something that you can probably answer in a public forum, Mr. Burns, and your own opinion on that, but I think that's a fair representation of how the residents feel and how we feel as councillors, that people should come first. And those flying fox can move to another location, and we can do it over a period of time. And the health of those human beings should be a higher priority than a branch for a flying fox to rest on when they have other options.
Especially, if I get through the mayor, especially when it's been council that's allowed that house to be built in that spot in the first place, and council that planted the trees when it was at one point grass that used to be mowed.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I will answer that bit. The comments you made about people versus environment, I'm not going anywhere near that, I'm afraid. I'm far too protective of my own skin to go down that path, because someone will get offended.
I know, just there, and I understand we had this discussion 12 months ago, and my response to those people was, well, go down and take your swag or your tent and pitch it there for a week and then come and tell me what it's like. There are people that, it's not about taking a lunar landscape approach and just going, well, there's a flying fox there, let's cut down the tree. But there has to be some balance, and I think the pendulum has swung too far in the direction of having a higher regard for the welfare of the flying fox, when there are health implications for those residents that live in those areas. And I think there needs to be a balanced approach in it, particularly when there are other areas that these animals could roost in that wouldn't cause the health issues to the residents.
And through you, Mr. Mayor, and I know we do occasionally take a bit of heat in this chamber for it, but the TLPI is exactly the document that reflects that there is a dichotomy between environment and people. And the TLPI is designed to allow council officers to control where people go so that they don't conflict in the interface with these environmentally protected flora, fauna and trees. So that biodiversity, and it's part of the planning scheme, that biodiversity element is something that controls our planning to ensure that properties and houses and people only move into areas where people are not going to come into conflict with the environment and possibly come into conflict with federally restricted legislation. But going back to Commissioner Scully and Councillor Deverell's comment, I'm pretty certain, Mr. Mayor, that the houses were built there well before the flying foxes decided to descend there. We can't project that. Yes, the trees were planted and supported to be planted by council, but you can go to any council in South East Queensland and they will tell you that greening the council for climate control, cool environments, having more trees in the environment, carbon sequestration, they're all things that are being led by both our federal and state and world political bodies. They're all things that we need to consider. It's been really hot this last couple of weeks. Those trees are planted to help mitigate those factors. So we're not going to not plant trees.
I don't think that's what anyone's asking for.
No, I think the issue is, planting the trees and all that sort of stuff, there's no issue with that. I think we should be making sure that we have a sort of a leafy green environment. It's when there is a problem that's identified, the opportunity for council, who are the ones that have to implement this legislation that are dictated to people, tourists by people in Canberra, is quite limited. Some of the limitations I'm comfortable with around when they're pupping and that, but even after that, the opportunity for staff to go in there and really make wholesale change to encourage these animals to go to a place where there aren't as many humans and they aren't creating health issues for the residents that are there are quite limiting, and I think they're cumbersome. They place a burden on our organisation which is unfair, given that the feds don't, assist us in dealing with their legislation burden. But ultimately, it's the residents that suffer, and I don't know how anyone could not have compassion for the people that are living in those circumstances, because no one would want to live like that, and yet these people are being forced to, and they're just, as I said, I don't think there's balance in the approach, and I'm sure maybe privately your staff may agree with that. There just seems to be too many hamstrings to actually get something done to protect people's health and wellbeing. Any other questions, Councillor Derrick?
That's me done. Thank you.
Councillor Stewart?
Just one question. It's to do with the position of, Recovery and Resilience Officer. Could you flesh out what that actually is? Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the staff is probably best placed to.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In regards to that position, 2 seconds, the position's been funded by the Department of Community, so it's a state government funded position, fully funded for 2 years. The purpose of the position is to undertake engagement with the community and programming until June 2025. Thank you, 2025. So that position's role is to work with our flood impacted communities, so that could be from Boobergin, Tansy, Gomerri, through Gympie itself in our recovery process from the floods. So at the moment, the council has a community recovery survey out to the public, where we're seeking residents' views and observations 1 year on from floods. So how are people travelling, how's their mental health, what kind of activities would they like to see in their communities, how their community organisations going. And based on the engagement through the survey and also through meeting with residents, we'll be building up a program of activities between now and June 2025. So the funding covers both the employee to undertake that work and also to program up the activities in the community. The office will be working closely with Red Cross as a recovery officer in the region, and there's also with our Gympie Community Place and community agencies across the region.
Any other questions, councillors? Councillor Miller?
Short-term accommodation, you did mention Rainbow Beach in the report there, and it does continue with discussions with property owners. There are a requirement to cease operations for a planning approval. My question is, if they are getting a planning approval and that is issued, does that actually come with operating conditions on that site?
I was a bit scared there, Mr. Mayor, when that question started, but I'm okay with that one. Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, all development approvals for this type, for short-term accommodation would come with conditions for the approval. That would be quite met, recognising the zoning that exists in the Republic.
Yeah, Councillor Miller.
On further questions, regulatory services, and it just notes here that you're working with QPS in relation to illegal camping at several locations. It doesn't actually clarify if it's visitation or illegal camping, or maybe potentially the homeless issue that we are under. I just want to get that clarified.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it's a double-pronged answer. We do our, when we have done during the last quarter, so we always do it in the Christmas quarter. We do, if you like, blitz on illegal camping, particularly at our coastal venues. We send officers out late at night, early in the morning. They do some warnings, and then they do some enforcement about illegal camping. You'll see that in a number of coastal communities across southeast and moving up to central Queensland. It is a problem for us. We do that, and that's what that refers to. we are also working in the community housing space for homeless issues. There are a couple of sites where we have worked with
there's a newly funded homelessness outreach worker who's now working in Gympie 5 days a week. That's a first for the Gympie region, funded through the Department of Housing. That position has just been filled. So that position is working closely with our rangers in terms of when there are sites where there are people experiencing homelessness and where the sites are perhaps maybe kind of unmanageable. We are working closely with the outreach workers and the department to try and find housing solutions.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, we're not actively going in and prohibitively enforcing the whole situation. We're trying to be considerate, and we make reference to the new work around the community housing. And as you would be aware, and we're obviously quite proud of the fact we were the first council to have a local housing action plan adopted in Queensland. So
There may be a need for some consideration of enforcement around Rainbow Beach and other areas. It appears that the numbers are on the rise again as people become a little bit more active in there.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we just had a bit of a blitz down in Kendanga, and I think we're going back out to Tincan and Rainbow Beach.
That would be great.
Yes, it's down for a distraction.
That's good.
Any other questions, councillors? No, we have a recommendation there for us. Is there someone to move? Councillor Deborah?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we do have an answer to one of the questions that was asked earlier. And
We'll just
very quickly.
Just to close out the Mary Street Art project. So just to advise that we have 2 more installations being prepared by the Science Lab, which will be installed soon, and then we'll have 2 more shops remaining that have provided permission to council to install works. So 2 being installed and then 2 further that we have permission to.
Another 4. That's wonderful. Thank you.
Councillor Stewart, the second. Deborah to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Happy to put this forward and support it. Thank you very much for such a comprehensive item. It's really good to see the details in there. Thank you for answering my questions and everyone else's as well, but mainly mine. Obviously, for me, being in Division 4, the flying foxes are a big issue because I deal with the people around there and I get their calls. So anything we can do to assist them, and I know that we were talking about smelling stuff or things to take away the smell and all the rest of it at some point, and also Mary Street, which is, of course, the jewel in our crown. I guess the thing with Mary Street for me is that if a business or someone wants to invest in our area, look to coming here and they go through Mary Street, they would be forgiven for thinking that we're on the way down. And that's why it's so important. It's not about the shop owners themselves, and it's not just about helping them, it's about the whole region, because when Mary Street looks vibrant and happening, the whole region looks vibrant and happening. At the moment, they've got to look past that, and they've got to maybe ask a few questions, and you've just got to hope that they do. So for me, that's why the windows are so important in there. So thank you very much. It's good to see that there's more going in.
Councillor Stewart.
Very positive report, lots of good things happening. It's good to see that there's an artist, Miriam Innes, who has displayed in the art gallery, also has one of her works in the library, and that's something I've been suggesting for years, but anyway, to better, I guess, encourage that integration and cross-fertilisation. The other one particular area I want to note is the local housing action plan, and I know often we hear about action plans and we think, oh God, not another action plan, what's it going to do? And it mentions a meeting on the 16th of March, which I had the privilege of going to, and they talked about how much has been done in the last year. And like the old James Street Caravan Park now has 26, I think it is, accommodation units. There's been another almost 20 that have been built in Gympie or placed in Gympie over the last 12 months, and they've let a contract for another 11. So it's amazing what can happen when people get together focused on addressing an issue, and council has played a role in that. at the Housing and Homelessness Forum earlier in the month, a member of staff, strategic planning, who's helping with developing a new planning scheme, was there and could interact with them about how the planning scheme will hopefully better enable housing for the whole price range, I guess. And so how our planning scheme can take on board those housing issues. So I think there's some really good things, and when we can work well with other levels of government, we can actually achieve some good goals.
2 speakers for the recommendation. Any speakers against? Any other speakers for? Councillor Mill.
I really enjoy having these director reports coming. I believe this one set the standard of information flow out to us and also the community. It does give us a good opportunity to ask questions and get further insight, and I believe that this directorate is quite vast and very integral to obviously our communities because it's community sustainability. I was encouraged to see that there's implementations and investigation looking at recycling alley at our waste facility, which is one of my passions, which makes it easier for residents to actually be involved and understand how they can recycle. And that waste survey to go out as well. It was interesting, the audit that was done on the select sites for the bins. The green waste in itself was food waste, not green waste in itself. So it'd be interesting to see how that green waste has affected that, or if it was anything different. But I also understand there are obviously different treatments as well. The wild dog issue on the coast, it's not a straightforward issue, as well as my understanding, and it's, I'm so looking forward to seeing that go through. And it was interesting to see that the erosion sediment control, we're getting a strategy come through for our building sites, and that actually has had some more, not forceful, but some action actually with some compliance and some pin noticing on that. So it's our actually enacting our responsibilities under that. So it was good to see that we're actually being able to do some stuff in some spaces in the organisation. So thank you.
Any other speakers for or against? Councillor Devereux to close.
Happy to go to the vote. Thank you.
With that, we're going to vote. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you.
Thank you, councillors.
Item 7.2, Creative Partnership Initiative, RADF.
Through you, Mr Mayor, Ms Stark is here to present this report today. We will take it as read, but I'm happy for Ms Stark to give you some salient points.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. In regard to item 7.2, which is the Creative Partnerships Initiatives, this is an initiative, as the name suggests, which has been initiated by Council with a total budget of $40,000 in RADF funding. So RADF is the Regional Arts Development Fund, which is a joint partnership between Queensland Government and Gympie Regional Council. So this initiative responds to Action 2A of Council's operational plan, in that the project aims to form partnerships with arts and cultural organisations to deliver projects that build the profile and capacity of local creatives and also enable community participation in arts and cultural activities. As outlined in the report, a total of 5 submissions were received by Council. They were reviewed by an evaluation panel, with 2 of those being selected to be awarded funding. The 2 submissions will be delivering 3 projects, one by Heart and Soul Sisters delivering 2 community mural projects, and the other to be delivered by Creative Arts Gympie Region. 2 really exciting projects there, one involving creative tourism mixer and also another project which aims at activating Gympie CBD as part of flood recovery. Also, just for councils to note, we will be putting in some money from the Community Recovery and Resilience Funds through MISVET, which was the funding that I alluded to with Councillor Stewart before in terms of the 100% funding from the state government. So by joining up those 2 funding pots, we're able to really fund some exciting projects in creative recovery and creative projects for the region. Thank you.
Any questions, councillors? We have a recommendation there before us. Is someone to move? Councillor Devereux, Councillor Stewart second, Councillor Devereux speak.
I had the pleasure of working with Heart and Soul Sisters on a mural in Mary Street last week, and I hadn't got to this item in the agenda yet, so I was very surprised when it was there. Angel is the lady from Heart and Soul Sisters, and she mentioned that she was well, she was worried at one point about doing the work there and it might harm her going for a grant. But she said that she was looking to get a grant for the toilet. She mentioned the one at the duck ponds. So, and then I got to it and it was in here. I didn't realise she'd already applied. So I am very pleased. The work she did down there I thought was absolutely brilliant. She did it off her own back, didn't get paid for it, and it was, I think, 4 days of her time, including whatever time she used in designing it. She seems to be a very lovely lady, and I'm more than happy to support this.
Councillor Stewart.
Mr Mayor, just I think people have liked the murals that have been around town. Unfortunately, we've lost some due to change in the way infrastructure is done, and it's certainly
art policy. There's a public advisory art group which is established, and that is the form in which the particular artworks are considered for a whole range of things in terms of materials to be used, the sealants, the lifespan, the suitability for the amenity around where the artworks to be placed.
Yeah, I think the community in general is a bit desperate for something new to smile at. So it's great to see. I know that I will enjoy going and having a look while it's being done and when it's finished. Thank you very much.
With that, we'll go to vote. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. Item 7.3, Community Grants Program 22-23.
Through you, Mr Mayor, to start, we'll stay here to present this one. Also, we'll take the report as read. We'll start, we'll give you a couple of salient points and then we can take questions.
Thank you very much. In terms of, this is the Community Grants Program 22-23, a funding recommendation. So the category that we're looking at today is the Recovery, Wellbeing and Resilience category, which is part of Council's rolling round. So just to note for councillors that 100% of the funding for these for this category is funded by the PHN, which is the Primary Health Network, now known as Country to Coast. So the purpose of this grant is to promote wellbeing and healing amongst the community, strengthen social connectedness, and engage with populations less likely to seek traditional mental health services, etc. So as the report outlines, we've received 2 grant applications in this round, one for a new park run in Tin Can Bay, and the other being Old School Health Matters, which is an exciting project which looks to partner Gympie Community Centre with the University of Sunshine Coast, their students, under professional supervision. The grants have been assessed according to the Community Grants Guidelines, and the recommendation is provided to Council to approve both of those grant applications.
Any questions, councillors? Councillor Devereux.
Thank you. Through the Mayor, perhaps Councillor Stewart can answer this for me. I know you're involved with the park run. When I first looked, I thought $7.5 grand, gee, that's a lot to set up a run. I mean, I've been involved with Hash House Harriers and stuff in the past. I've set up runs, I've set up rallies with cars, all the rest of it. Well, not proper rallies, but fun ones. It seems like a lot of money. When we're looking at 40,000, could you explain to people what's involved with setting up a park run? Why that cost is there?
I don't know all the costs, but part of this first aid equipment, like a defibrillator, that's pretty expensive. There's things like vests for volunteers and flags and various other expenses. I'm not too sure on the details of all the expenses.
No, what you've just said actually answers a fair bit. Defibrillator's about 10 grand, I think. So it's not just to plan the run, it's for everything around it.
So, yeah, and like the run's been planned, hasn't been finally approved, but it's been planned and it's got approval from council, which is good for the council parks people.
I think it's wonderful. Thank you very much.
I think given the location of Tin Can Bay, the defibrillator is probably good. Any other questions, councillors? That we have a recommendation there. Is there someone to move? No rush. Councillor Devereux. Someone to second? Councillor Mill. Councillor Devereux to speak.
I'm actually quite happy with these. I think, in particular for me, the park run, getting people out and moving. You don't have to run it, you can walk it. I know the one in town's very popular, and the more that we can get like that in the region, the better, because
Councillor Miller.
These applications are taking advantage of monetary flow that comes from situations that we have experienced. It's good to see it's externally funded and we actually just get to do the administration, so we know it's getting local value. It's great to have organisations that can actually facilitate this. I do know the parkrun one was, someone had brought it up a while ago down in Tinkham Bay, we're talking years ago, but there was actually no identifier that was suitable. And it's how our infrastructure upgrades, which is our pathway upgrades, which was a lot of external funding as well, as I believe, has enabled an event like this to be actually being held in Tinkham Bay. So that's been great. And look, the Gympie community plays a wonderful job in this community, and it's just been fantastic. They can actually facilitate a program as well. So I'm going to accept this.
2 speakers for the recommendation, 2 speakers against. And speakers for. Councillor Spurn, are you interested in the parkrun? Actually, I thought the old school.
I was just hoping that we might have the meeting and then do the first one. That's another reason that it's Triple O.
Any other speakers for or against? With that, we'll go to close.
I can only assume that Councillor Smurden's calling the Mayor a bit of a heart stopper.
Don't get you carried away.
No, happy to go to the vote, thank you.
With that, we'll go to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. Item 7.4, high zoning proposals, bridge on Scrap Road. I'll hand over to Mr Burns.
Through you, Mr Mayor, and bring the stand-on in to support me with this one. Essentially, as Council will be aware, we received a proposal in September that was reasonably well discussed at the time. As a result of that, we brought both a draft and a policy regarding the naming of council facilities to council, which was adopted in December. We've subsequently gone through a consultation period. I guess one of the reasons I'm speaking now is that I just thought I would share, because there has been some concern. It's the beauty of rural living. We delivered a number of letters to houses in the Theban area. But for those councillors who remember this, when a poster sees a letter in a rural letterbox, they take it out and send it and post it, and that's how they use their own mailbox as a post box in those rural areas. Unfortunately, we delivered the letters, council staff, and posted saw the letters in the letterbox, took them all out and sent it back to us. So about 25% of them came back to us courtesy of a very efficient Australian Post Service. So we remedied that, and then went through a process where we re-provided those to the community. We had a number of submissions, everyone was supportive. There was 2 suggestions that...
There was 4 objections, and then there was a number that just suggested a big day conversion on warrant.
But I'll hand over to the stand-up in case you want to say anything.
Oh, no, not really. I think Mr Burns has summarised that pretty well.
Any questions, councillors? No? Oh, yeah, Councillor Desmond.
I just would like an explanation about the delivery of the letters, because on the map we've got, we asked someone that's not in our region, because we went, I'm not sure if we actually did exactly what's on here, but also where the bridge is, we didn't ask the people down the end of that road, and we didn't ask in Gonalda, which is probably the largest population base that's in that area around the bridge. Am I right with that?
Yes, through you, Mr Mayor. Yeah, that's the area that was determined as the appropriate catchment for Theban.
But Theban, but the bridge is, as you can see from where the green dot is, it might be in Theban, but it's close to Gonalda. Yeah. I was just a bit surprised by that, that's all. But we got a good response, so.
And through you, Mr Mayor, it was also on the website and Facebook and other mechanisms.
Any other questions, councillors? We have a recommendation there before us. It's just time to move. Councillor Jensen. Councillor Smoot, second. Councillor Jensen speaks.
It's a wonderful honour to be able to do this for a family that has sort of quite a few generations out of Peabody. The positive comments were amazing. It was wonderful to read, which backs up why we're doing this. There was only one scathing one, and everyone in the town decided that that person didn't know them or did not live there. So the number was a good number of responses. Warren Dakin was a wonderful man. The Dakin family are well respected in Peabody, so I'm very happy to move the naming of the spreadsheet.
Councillor Smoot.
Yeah, okay, Councillor Jensen sentiments. This is a good result for that particular area. It shows that council has listened to the community and backed it on. So it's a good result.
2 speakers for the recommendation, 8 speakers against. Now the speakers for. Councillor Devereux.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Hartwig. I just want to address a couple of points, the negative comments that we got, and just say that it's not overly expensive or a drain on council. It shouldn't be to name the bridge. And we can chew gum and walk at the same time. That's what council does. We don't just do roads. Every time we spend money, we seem to get a lot of people saying, I wish they'd just fix the road, they shouldn't be spending on this. That's not how council works. And to just reiterate, to repeat that it is a wonderful thing to be able to name a bridge what the people in that area want that bridge named, and to give a little bit of power back to the community and the residents of the area, because it's very easy, I think, as a council to see that we've got the power, we're in control, we can do what we want. Whereas this is just a way for me of acknowledging that it's the residents' community, and we're doing something that they feel very strongly about. So thank you very much to staff. I know it wasn't ideal in some ways, but it's important.
Any other speakers for or against? Councillor Jensen to close.
Oh, there's been enough said. Let's go to the vote.
All those in favour? Can everyone do that again? Against? Carried. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If I may, I believe that the 1st of May is the anniversary of...
1st of April.
1st of April, sorry. Is the anniversary of Mr. Dakin's passing. So this is going to be very appropriate and very welcome for the family. So I'm sure that that's a good result by council today.
Yeah.
Thank you.
As a bushfire, we will.
Item 8.1, as we're aware, has been removed from the agenda.
Mr. Mayor, so I don't enact my rights under 16.4 of the standing orders. Is it being removed to be considered and being brought back for discussion, or is it just being removed? There we go.
The item has been removed from the agenda, and we will consider the matter in greater detail in the coming months. So that ends our meeting for today. Thank you.